Hi, thank you for joining me for Tuesday Talks. I'm Michelle Jewsbury. Today's topic is going to be racism, sexism, and domestic violence. If this is your first time tuning in, we've been around for a couple of months now. The reason why Tuesday Talks exists is because I was involved in a domestic violence relationship for 3 years, plus 1 year after that was emotional, psychological, and financially abusive. Because of what's happened to me, I felt compelled to tell my story, and now there's a weekly talk called Tuesday Talks. So I'm going to dive right in. A few days ago, I woke up with a lot of pain on my heart, and I didn't really know why until I turned on the news. And if you're tuning in from a different country, I'm going to be talking about what's happening here in the United States currently, with no prejudice against other nations whatsoever. There was a nationalist rally taking place in Charleston, Virginia, and this white supremacist rally was very controversial, and a man ended up driving his car through the crowd, killing one person and injuring 19 people. It is horrifying. Any type of violence around the world, including the United States, should be stopped. Being racial prejudice, domestic violence, sexism, child abuse, no matter what it is, it should be stopped. But this in the 21st century is really shocking to me, that there's still racism that happens. If you don't know what racism is a prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against somebody of a different race based on the belief that your own race is superior. During the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, he insisted on having a peaceful revolution. Instead of putting physically capable men on the front lines, he ended up putting women and children on the front lines so they wouldn't combat and fight back. But what was so interesting is that the white police officers were still hosing down these African American women and children, and then this was broadcast, and it was used to awaken white America to what's actually happening in their own backyard. What was really brought to my attention is that racism, sexism, and domestic violence have a lot of similarities. If you don't know what sexism is, sexism is a prejudice, stereotype, or discrimination, typically against women based on their sex. So it's putting a woman down, antagonizing a woman, telling that person that they're no good compared to your sex. Domestic violence, if you don't know what that is, it's typically against women, but 1 in 11 men experience domestic violence here in the United States as well. And it's a violent or aggressive behavior at home towards your spouse or partner. Now, people in the 21st century are justifying racial prejudice, sexism, and domestic violence. The correlation between all three of these is that it shouldn't be around in this day and age. I live in the United States of America, where everybody is supposed to be treated equally, which we all know that equality is something that we still fight for. And we need to take a stand against any form of discrimination, intolerance, prejudice. And we as a people, without taking a stand, we are allowing this bigotry to continue. And it's a horrible epidemic that needs to be stopped. Racial prejudice is... Okay, so I'm going to tell you my story real fast. I grew up in a very racist town. I grew up in a place up north in northern Idaho where the Aryan Nation compound used to exist. It used to be walking distance from my home. And growing up with different morals and values, the people that I lived around, before I experienced the rest of the world, the rest of the country, that's what I thought and that's what I believed for, I don't know, until I was, I want to say 10 or 11. And the problem is education. Parents are teaching their children to be prejudiced against somebody because of their skin color. Human beings, all of us, are loved by Jesus Christ. And he loves black, white, gay, straight, lesbian, an abuser, and a victim or survivor. And we should not have prejudice against each other, being racial prejudice, being domestic violence, or sexism. Jesus died for every person on this planet. That should say something. That should make us want to take a stand against what is morally wrong in this country and worldwide. We cannot play God, and we oftentimes think that we can. I want to leave you with 3 quotes from 3 different men that all really mean to me that we all need to take a stand and unite and take a stand against discrimination, whether it be abuse of any kind, prejudice of any kind, or intolerance of any kind. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German pastor and theologian, an anti-Nazi dissident who died in 1945, said, "If I see a madman driving a car into a group of innocent bystanders, then I can't, as a Christian, simply wait for the catastrophe and then comfort the wounded and bury the dead. I must try to wrestle the steering wheel out of the hands of the driver." Now, he said this, of course, sometime before he died. And what just happened was a madman drove into a group of bystanders in 2017. And it feels to me that our world is just repeating itself over and over again. Another quote is from Ronald Reagan. He said, "There are no easy answers, but there are simple answers. We must have the courage to do what is morally right." Many of us don't have the courage to take a stand or talk about what is morally right or wrong. And then the last one is a quote from Edmund Burke. "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." So please, everybody, take a stand, speak up, and unsilence your voices about abuse, racism, sexism, and domestic violence. Thank you for joining me on Tuesday Talks. Please join me next week.